to Upper Room Ministries Sunday School here in Dover, Pennsylvania. We're so glad that you've joined us as we continue our study of the prophecies of the Bible, what have come to pass and what have not. We are still continuing in the book of Ezekiel. We have entered into the final chapters of the book of Ezekiel, where it talks about the millennial kingdom and the millennial temple, and even more specifically, life in the millennial temple and the millennial kingdom. What it's going to be like. We shall begin in chapter 43. The previous chapters dealt with the temple itself and what it looks like. So in chapter 43, we're starting with prophecy 25:06, which is verses 1 through 5. It talks about how the Messiah, Jesus, when he returns and takes residence in the millennial temple, says he shall enter through the east gate. And why he chooses to enter through the east gate, I'm really not at all sure. But that's the gate that he is going to enter when he comes, takes his place, and the 1,000-year kingdom begins. Then we move on to prophecy 25:07. Verses 6 and 7. Here he promises to dwell in the presence of Israel forever. And it says, my holy name, the house of Israel shall no more defile, neither they nor their kings by their whoredom, nor by the carcasses of their kings in high places. So that's prophecy 25:08. 07 again is that the Messiah will dwell in the presence of Israel forever, and 108 is that the house of Israel shall no more defile his name nor their kings by the whoredoms, nor by the carcasses of their kings in high places. All right, verse 9, prophecy 25:09. I guess you could say this is a clarification of prophecies 25:07 and 08, where it says, now let them put away their whoredom and the carcasses of their kings far from me, and I will dwell in the midst of them forever. So, before the Messiah can settle into the temple, Israel has to come to a realization that they need to put away their whoredoms and the carcasses of their kings. Before one prophecy can come to pass, another prophecy has to, shall we say, come into agreement. Okay? But obviously this will happen because the previous few verses say it will happen. Okay, prophecy 25:10 is verses 10 through 12. It says, thou son of man, show the house to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the pattern. And if they be ashamed of all they have done, show them the form of the house, and the fashion thereof, and the goings out thereof, and the comings in thereof, and all the forms thereof, and all the ordinances thereof, and all the forms thereof, and all the laws thereof, and write it in their sight, they may keep the whole form thereof, and the ordinances thereof, and do them. This is the law of the house. So, there is going to be a law of the house. Israel is to abide by the law, and they will if they truly are sorry for their iniquities. Okay, prophecy 25:11 This is verses 13 through 17. This talks about the sacrificial altar that will be built in the temple. It's a description, physical description of the altar. Now, perhaps you're wondering why is there going to be a sacrificial altar if the sacrificial system has already been done away with? Well, what you need to keep in mind is that animal sacrifices back in the Old Covenant never cleansed anybody of sin. They simply set the sin aside. It was only by the blood of Christ that sin could truly be cleansed. So when animals are sacrificed, they will not be for the cleansing of sin. It'll simply they'll simply serve as a reminder as to what the Messiah had to do for them when during his first coming. Okay. Then you have verses 18 through 22. This is prophecy 25:12. This talks about, it describes the ordinances for the sin offering, and you can read that yourselves. Won't get into much detail, but in verse 19, we have prophecy 25:13. It says, "And thou shalt give to the priests, the Levites, that be of the seed of Zadok, which approach unto me to minister unto me, saith the Lord, a young bullock for a sin offering." So this is something that's been set aside solely for the Levites of the house of Zadok. What you're going to find is that the house of Zadok is the favorite Levitical house, whereas the other Levites they will not have the same favor. And the reason this is so is because the Levites became divided during the reign of Jeroboam and Rehoboam, which is found in 1 Kings 12. The Levites went with Jeroboam, who made golden calves to worship and turned the hearts of the northern tribes against Jehovah. Only the house of Zadok remained faithful to God. And as you'll see, the descendants of the other Levitical houses will have to pay for the iniquities of their ancestors. On the other hand, the descendants of Zadok will reap the benefits of the faithfulness of their ancestors. We'll get to that shortly. Verses 23 and 24. It talks about the ordinances for burnt offerings, and then 25 and 26. It talks about prophecy 25:15. Describes the cleansing of the altar and the consecration of the priests, how that is to be done. In verse 27, prophecy 25:16. Says, "And when these days are expired, it shall be on the 8th day, and so forward, the priest shall make your burnt offerings upon the altar, and your peace offerings, and I will accept you." So, this is a continual offering to be offered up by the priests. Chapter 44. Prophecy 25:17. It talks about the east gate, how once the Messiah enters through the east gate, it shall be shut, and no man will be allowed to enter through the east gate, because the Messiah has entered for it. And that's prophecy 25:17. But in verse 3, it talks about, "It is for the prince he shall sit in it to eat before the Lord. He shall enter by way of the porch of that gate, and shall go out by the way of the same." It's prophecy 25:18. This prince will be the earthly ruler of the millennial kingdom. He, of course, will be under the authority of the Messiah. That's very important to remember. As far as who the earthly ruler shall be, that is presently unknown. Verse 5, prophecy 25:19. Actually, it's verses 5 through 8. It says, And the Lord said unto me, Son of man, mark well, and behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears all that I say unto thee concerning all the ordinances of the house of the law and the laws thereof, and mark well the entering in of the house with every going forth of the sanctuary. And you shall say to the rebellious, even to the house of Israel, Thus saith the Lord God, O ye house of Israel, let it suffice you all of your abominations, in that ye have brought into my sanctuary strangers, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh, to be in my sanctuary. Where ye offer my bread, the fat of the blood, and they have broken my covenant because of all your abominations, and ye have not kept charge of my holy things, but have set keepers of my charge in my sanctuary for yourselves. So this talks about a defilement by letting the uncircumcised of heart into the temple. Could this be addressing past offenses, ones that have already happened? Perhaps. In fact, that's probably true. That's probably true. So, but the prophecy is in the marking of the house, and for the mark, verse 9, prophecy 25:20. No stranger uncircumcised in heart, nor uncircumcised in flesh, shall enter into my sanctuary of any stranger that is among the children of Israel. So that's going to be the rule, the law of the house. No one uncircumcised in heart or in flesh is to enter his chambers. Okay, and the Levites that are gone away far from me when Israel went astray, which went astray away from me after their idols, they shall even bear their iniquity. So again, this is what I discussed earlier. The descendants of the houses of the Levitical houses, which went with Jeroboam and the worshipping of idols and turned their backs towards God, they shall bear their iniquity, prophecy 25:21. And then it talks about what their priestly duties will be in verses 11 and 12, which is prophecy 25:22. Here they will not be cast off entirely, but they shall be used only as gatekeepers, butchers of the sacrifices, and in other lower type services. They will not be priests who come near God and minister the holy things in the most holy place. As I said before, that's reserved for the house of Zadok, back in prophecy 25:13. Okay. All right, then we... Oh, actually, I'm sorry. That prophecy 25:22 is covered in 11 through 14, not just 11 and 12. Okay. 25:23, covered in verses 15 and 16. This addresses the house of Zadok, where it says, But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, that kept the charge of my sanctuary, when the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall come near me to minister unto me. They shall stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood, saith the Lord God. So they will make offerings directly to God himself. This is truly a place, this is truly the highest honor that can be bestowed on any priest. And it's the sons of Zadok that will get to enjoy this. 17 through 19, prophecy 25:24. This is a description of the priestly garments that the Levites are to wear. And then go down to verses 20 through 27, prophecy 25:25. talks about prohibitions and duties of the priests. It says, "Neither shall they shave their heads, nor suffer their locks to grow long. They shall only pull their heads. Neither shall any priest drink wine, and when they enter into the inner court, neither shall they take for their wives a widow, nor her that is put away, but shall take the maidens of the seed of the house of Israel, or a widow that had a priest there." And then it talks about what they shall teach and how they're not allowed to touch a dead corpse to defile themselves, and the cleansing process should they do defile themselves. And then going on into verses 28 through 31, talks about what their and it shall be unto them for an inheritance. I am their inheritance, and ye shall give them no possession in Israel. I am their possession. So the priests are really to be a people without possession, have nothing to be left for them. Instead, God is literally going to be all they have, their only possession. And I think to truly be in a position to understand what that is also a place of high honor. For God to be your only possession. For God to be all you have. Okay? And furthermore, it talks about they shall eat the meat offering and sin offering and the trespass offering, and every dedicated thing in Israel shall be theirs. And the first of all fruits of all things, and every oblation of all, and every sort of your oblations, shall be the priest's. Ye shall also give unto the priest the first of your dough, that he may cause the blessing to rest in thine house. The priest shall not eat of anything that is dead of itself, or torn, whether it be fowl or beast. So, yeah, the priest, they're definitely going. They definitely are going to have a lot of rules to observe, similar to that of the Old Covenant. All right, now starting in chapter 45, verses 1 through 8. This is a description of the Holy Oblation. The Holy Oblation is a division of the Promised Land the tribe of Levi will have set aside to them. This description begins, like I said, chapter 45, verses 1 through 8, and the description continues in chapter 48, verses 8 through 22. And like I said, the Levites, they are the chosen priests, and they will have a very special plot of land all to themselves. Starting in chapter 45, verse 9, and going all the way through to the end of chapter 46, is prophecy 25:27. This covers a list of Mosaic laws that are to be observed. There are a number of subheadings here, and I'll read them off to you. All right. Chapter 45, verse 9, the rulers are to be just. Verses 10 through 12 talks about having just weights and just balances. In other words, a fairness and honesty in merchandise and trade. 13 and 15 about offerings. 16 through 17 gives a summary of millennial and eternal worship. Verses 18 through 25. These cover the offerings and the time to prepare and to present these offerings. We'll move on to chapter 46, verses 1 through 7. It covers the worship of prince and people during Sabbaths and new moons. So Sabbath days and new moons shall be observed in this millennial kingdom. Then verses 8 through 10 deals with the entrances for the priest and people during the feasts. Verses 11 through 15 are laws regarding various offerings. 16 through 18 talks about inheritances. 19 and 20 covers place for preparation of the offerings of the priests. Verses 22 through 24 finally. This deals with the four corner chambers and the outer wall of the sanctuary for boiling the sacrifices of the people. So that's something to keep in mind of. Not all offerings are burnt. Some will be boiled as well. Okay. Chapter 47. Verses 1 through 12. This is a description of the river of the sanctuary. Let's read some. Starting in verse 1. Afterward, he brought me again unto the door of the house, and behold, waters issued out from under the threshold of the house eastward, for the forefront of the house stood toward the east, and the waters came down from under the right side of the house at the side of the altar. Then he brought me out of the way of the gate northward, and led me about the way without unto the utter gate, by the way that looketh eastward, and behold, there ran out waters on the right side. And when the man that had in line his hand went forward eastward, he measured 1,000 cubits, and he brought me through the waters were to the ankles. And all the remaining verses all the way through 12, again, a physical description of this river. This river is also prophesied in other places. One place is Zechariah chapter 14, verses 8 through 9. And another place is the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verses 1 through 2. Prophecy 25-29, verses 13 all the way through 23. These are the borders of the entire land, of the entire kingdom. And there's really no need to go into great detail. It's just telling you the northern border, eastern border, western border, southern border, and all that exciting stuff. You can certainly read that in your own time, but that's Prophecy 25-29. Chapter 48. Now here we get to divisions within these borders. The land will be divided up into 12 portions, one for each tribe of Israel. This prophecy runs all the way to verse 29. Okay, let's read some of it. Okay, now these are the names of the tribe from the north end to the coast of the way of Hethlon, as one goeth to Hamath, as Hazarnon, the border of Damascus, northward to the coast of Hamath. For these are his sides east and west, a portion for Dan, and by the border of Dan from east to the west side, a portion for Asher, and by the border of Asher from the east side even to the west side, a portion for Naphtali, and by the border of Naphtali from the east side unto the west side, a portion for Manasseh, and by the border of Manasseh from the east side unto the west side, a portion for Ephraim. Now, it's important, something to remember, Joseph was one of the original 12 tribes, but Ephraim and Manasseh, those are his sons. So Ephraim and Manasseh, essentially, even though they're two houses, they represent one tribe, the tribe of Joseph. Verse 6, and by the border of Ephraim, from the east side even unto the west side, a portion for Reuben, and by the border of Reuben, from the east side unto the west side, a portion for Judah. Now then we get to verses 8 through 22. This talks about, again, the holy oblation. Verses 8 through 12 talks about the portion of the oblation that will go to the priests and the sanctuary. And then 13 through 14 describe the portion for the rest of the Levites. Yeah, not all Levites will be priests, apparently. And verses 15 through 19 gives the description of the portion for the city itself. And verse 20, all the oblations shall be 5 and 20,000 by 5 and 20,000. Ye shall offer the holy oblation foursquare with the possession of the city. Verses 21 through 22. This is the prince's portion of the holy oblation. Again, the prince is the earthly ruler of the millennial kingdom underneath the Messiah. And verses 23 through 29, they gives us a description of the portions for the remaining 5 tribes of Israel. And finally, prophecy 25:31. This describes the miniature foursquare earthly Jerusalem patterned after the heavenly Jerusalem. It says, and the gates of the city shall be after the names of the tribes of Israel, 3 gates northward, 1 gate of Reuben, 1 gate of Judah, 1 gate of Levi. And the east side 4,503 gates, and 1 gate of Joseph, 1 gate of Benjamin, 1 gate of Dan. And the south side 3 gates, and 1 gate of Simeon, 1 gate of Issachar, 1 gate of Zebulun. And the west 4,500 with their gates, 1 gate of Gad, 1 gate of Asher, 1 gate of Naphtali. It was round 18,000 measures, and the name of the city from that day shall be, the Lord is there. Well, that concludes the book of Ezekiel. Join us next time when we shall begin the final major prophet, Daniel.
Let you